The number one thing advisors worry about isn't the stock market. It's, did I forget something that I needed to remember for a client? That's their number one concern. We, through our note taking and through our systems here, are able to make it so that you get done with a client meeting within minutes. All of the follow-up is ready for you.
What happens behind the scenes, the research, the preparation, the situational awareness, can make or break an experience. And if it's done well, you never know about all that work. You just reap the benefits. Well, Matt Halloran has walked and studied the backstage of the financial advisor world. I'm Patrice Sikora. Matt, I have one question for you. Why? Why financial advisors?
Yeah. So I don't think I've actually ever told this story on a podcast before. I was a therapist before I got into financial services, and I had a extraordinarily bad week. I didn't have a lot of support as a therapist. My mentor was bad. And he just never really answered my questions. So I had a mother who actually committed suicide in front of her son. I had two of my kids went to jail, not prison, jail. And a couple of other of my more aggressive mental illness clients passed away. It was like all in a week. It was just like the worst week you could possibly have. And so Patrice, my wife, says, how much longer can you do this? And I said, I don't think I can do this much longer after, $80,000 in student loans and 3 years of studying for my master's degree and all of that stuff. So I went to monster.com, which I don't even know if that exists anymore. I went to monster.com and I typed in life coach because my master's degree is actually as a therapist and also as a life coach. So I'm very rare in the United States where I have a master's degree in life coaching. So very few schools offer that. Academically rigorous, all of that stuff. And two things showed up. The first thing was Vistage, right? Which is a huge, CEO organization. And they wanted like a capital investment of like $250,000. And I was broke, right? And then the other one was this company called Peak, which his name is now Omani Carson was his coaching program. And I applied and they said no, and they said no, and they said no. So finally, after my 7th application and they said no, I was on with who ended up being my boss. Her name is Laura Pearson, probably still the best boss I've ever had to this day. And I said, give me 10 minutes with the owner. It's all I want is 10 minutes. And so Patrice, I drove to a place called Von Mar in Omaha, Nebraska, and I bought the most expensive suit I could buy. It was $780. This was in 2006. Whoa. I know. Yeah. In 2006, that was a halfway decent amount of money. And I put the suit on, it looked great. I still own the suit today, by the way, because I'm never getting rid of it.
Can you wear it?
I can't fit into it anymore, but I appreciate the question. I'm working on that, sister. And so I ended up, so I'm sitting across from then Ron Carson, now Omani Carson. And I said, pay me half of what you're paying everybody else. And I promise you, I'm going to be your best coach in the next 6 months. And within 6 months, I was flying around on his jet. I was his opening act. I created the True Wealth Institute. And it didn't become the best coach that they had. This guy named Greg Opitz is still there today. I think he might have retired, but he was the best coach they ever had. But that's how I got into financial services. And then I learned very, very, very quickly, people don't understand how much pressure and what the relationship is that financial advisors have with their clients. The general public just thinks that these salespeople who are trying to hawk you the latest stock pick. And after I started getting to know CFPs and, other people who really in the financial planning world and people who weren't so focused on getting rates of return, but really helping people live that life they worked so hard, all of their life to have a retirement that they dreamed of, I realized I was in the right place.
Was there one moment when you just realized that they have all this weight, this pressure on them? Financial advisors, that is.
So I started in 2006. And so when 2008 happened, that's when I really realized everything. When I would be on the phone with my advisors and my client, they're bawling. Matt, I either sold at the wrong time or I still haven't sold yet. I don't know what to do. My client's retirement is being entirely wiped out. I would have other people who were like, yep, I already planned for this. We have a cash flow buffer. We have a cash flow moat. So I really learned the difference between what a real financial planner was in '08 than from a person who really hung their hat on performance. Right. And so since then, I've really leaned much more towards what it really truly means to be a financial planner. Now with financial therapy, and there's all of these kind of offshoots of behavioral finance, all of these offshoots of what it really truly means to have that relationship.
So at what point did you feel like this wasn't just a job, this was more of a calling, a mission?
When I was still at Peak, we had created something, Steve Sandusky, Omani, a woman named Susan Galvin, and I created something called the True Wealth Institute. And it was based off of a man named George Kinder. And he had created this holistic life planning system. And it was borderline therapy, to be really transparent. And we didn't want to, because I was a therapist and I knew what the line was. And so we built something that was much lighter. But we would sit around and I would teach financial advisors how to ask better questions, how to use silence. Surprisingly enough, I mean, I've written books about this now, but it's one of those pieces where I think when you can teach advisors how to be fully present, where they're not, well, God, I got to talk to them about this, or, oh my God, they said this, or, oh, I'm really worried about having this conversation with them. When they can really be fully present because they're really, really prepared, they know that all of the follow-up and stuff is going to be taken care of. And I didn't know that there was going to be software like what we built here at Zox back then. I was just teaching them how to have better conversations. And now we've got all of these unbelievable tools that relieve a lot of that pressure, the prep pressure, the follow-up pressure, the meeting notes pressure, having disparate systems that aren't talking to each other pressure. Now that I'm here, it's this really funny like epiphany, like, oh my God, all of that stuff that I had worked on and helped build and all of those advisors that I've coached over the years. And now I'm sitting here at Zox and it all kind of makes sense that the wind really blew me in the right direction.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about your background, the therapy, the listening, and how it shaped the way you approach this field.
Yeah. I saw a huge gap. And I still don't think that gap has really been fully filled today. So my first book was the Social Media Handbook for Financial Advisors, because I was just trying to get them into using social, because I knew that that was going to be the key to growth. It still is, right? We know that. Then when I wrote Shut the F Up and Listen, it was the gap between what I saw, and this, it might shock the audience a little bit, maybe not, maybe piss some people off. I don't really care. How men communicate versus how women communicate in financial services, because I've been involved with this organization called Females in Finance really since it started. Cheryl Hickerson started the organization, and I was a male ally network. And so my job was to help use my privilege to help further women in financial services, which I will do proudly and gladly for the rest of my life. And I just saw the differences between the relationship and communication. And I was like, we need to teach people how to do that more and more. And now with me being here at Zox, when I was applying here, I pitched them with this Now What marketing campaign. And the Now What marketing campaign is we've been able to prove through many, many different firms that we can give you anywhere from 8 to 12 hours back in your week from what we call the invisible work. So this is all of the stuff that your clients never see, Patrice. It's all of the paperwork and all the rigmarole and all the stuff that has to be done behind the scenes for advisors to be able to provide the service that they want for you as a client. But when you have that time back, what should you do with that time? And this podcast is called Better Practice, Better Life, because we believe that you're not just going to have a more efficient practice. You're not going to be able to provide better service, but with some of that time, you will hopefully become a better listener. You'll hopefully become a better spouse. You'll hopefully become a better sibling, right? Maybe you're going to work on yourself physically or spiritually or psychologically, because when you have that time, our goal with this show specifically is to give advisors the tools to make it so that they don't just fill it with more invisible work.
Talk to me about some of the more emotional moments that you've seen with advisors and in your experience that have stayed with you and that today still influence the way you approach advisors.
Yeah. I had an advisor. She lived in Illinois. She was an Ameriprise advisor. we were going through her numbers, which we did at the beginning of every year because we were doing goal setting and all of that stuff. And I noticed that she sold an enormous amount of life insurance, but astronomical amount of life insurance. In fact, the majority of her income was from life insurance. And I was on a call with her and I was like, I don't understand. How do you do this? And she said, Matt, insurance is the easiest sell in the world because you either love somebody or you owe somebody money. Which one is it?
Ooh.
And that was the first time that any advisor ever was able to show me how important something as simple as term life insurance can be. And then Patrice, that just opened up the floodgates. Then I started learning about asset allocation. And then I started learning about financial planning. And then I started learning about cash flow analysis and goals-based versus, income-based sort of financial planning. And then I started learning, about all of the stuff that happens when your advisor is the first call after somebody passes. And the weight of all of that. I remember, so Sherry was her name. And I just want to finish that story very quickly. I walked down to the insurance agent over at Carson Wealth and I said, I need to buy more life insurance. And he just started laughing. He's like, this never happened to me in my life. I was like, yeah, I know. I wanted to be the first one. But I had another one who he specifically focused, his niche was widows. And he did an event called Galentine's Day. Now, this is based off a show called Parks and Rec. So the main character used to do Galentine's Day, which was just single women or women would get together before Valentine's Day, especially if they were alone or whatever. And so he used to do this event. He didn't call it Galentine's Day. He just called it something else before Parks and Rec came out. And he was like, Matt, the amount of appreciation and the amount of community, the deepening of the relationships that I now have with these women, because I don't go to the events. He was a guy. I have my team. Mm-hmm. He had two other women, associate wealth advisor, and his front desk person is basically his full-time assistant, the woman who actually ran the whole practice. And they would go. And all, since the advisor wasn't there, their kind of guard was even down even further, but all they would do is share stories about what that firm did for them, how much they took care of for these widows. Because, and this, Patrice, it's unfortunately still this way. Men a lot of times are the decision makers when it comes to finance. Luckily, that's now starting to change more and more. But a lot of women were kept in the dark. These women would think that they were, doing really, really well and their husband would pass. And then all of a sudden the financial advisor was the bearer of terrible, terrible news. So that's really a lot of the emotional components. One was how simply you can communicate a very powerful thing, which is buying life insurance. And then also what the relationships can do for the clients that advisors have that I think changes everything.
Well, expand on that, the additional time, free time that advisors should have with Zox.
Yeah.
What to do with it? How do you accept it?
Well, they don't. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest problem. I believe for everything you want in life, you have to be willing to give up something proportionate to that want. And I believe that there are 5 things that you can give up: time, talents, treasures, relationships, and control. And when you're going to make a major life change, when you get 10 hours back, so that is an entire week's worth of work a month. Like if we want to quantify that, right? If you get a week back into your life, your equilibrium is shot.
Exactly.
You've been working 60 plus hours a week and now you're working less than 40, right? Because again, you shouldn't be working 60 hours a week anyway. But now you have this time back. I believe that advisors need to ask themselves a very, very difficult question, which is, what is missing in my life? What is missing? That's a tough question, because if something's missing in your life, that means you have to make a tough decision in order to make a big change. There's a great video on YouTube this rabbi is talking about the pain of growth. And he talks about a lobster and how a lobster has to basically grow so much and get so uncomfortable that its shell pops in order for it to go ahead and hit the next level of its maturity. And so many of us, when we get that resistance or that pain or that discomfort, we immediately go back to what we know. And I want to challenge advisors to say that brief period of pain and discomfort that you're getting, because it's pain and discomfort. Yes, is it freedom? Are we giving you time back? Absolutely. But it's upsetting your apple cart. And when you realize that there's apples on the ground and you need to figure out what to do with it, I want you to just realize that it's not a long time for you to be able to push through and really find out what is missing in your life and take some of that time. I don't care if it's just a couple hours a month, Patrice, but just take some of that time that is given back to you from you not having to do the invisible work and work on yourself.
What do you mean?
Well, first off, I firmly believe that the greatest journey one could ever take is within, right? Socrates said that, right? I don't think enough people really realize they get to their end of their life and what they've been doing is they realize that there's something missing. And they throw money into that gaping hole into their soul and they realize, wow, that's an infinite hole and I can't seem to fill that with money. You need to find other ways to find fulfillment. And I did a TED talk on this, Patrice. It's called Hope, Help One Person Every Day. Finding just that brief moment of being kind and either saying something or doing something or just being present for somebody who needs you makes all of the difference in the world. And now you have the time. Now you aren't so busy, which is just, we solve the busy. We really do. My eyes have been opened forever. So I've been in this since 2006. Advisors always say, I'm too busy. I can't do that. Okay. Now you don't have that excuse. What were you going to do? And when are you going to get off your ass and do it?
How do you feel when an advisor comes up to you and says, I've got the time now and I know what I'm going to do with it?
Yeah. So this has happened a bunch. I've never, ever in my entire life worked for an organization that gets unsolicited recommendations and testimonials like I have here. I do a lot of conferences. I'm on the road often. That's part of my job here as the chief evangelist. And the first conference we were at, that I was at was wealth.com did something called Estate Con, which was they were launching some new software and there were about 300-400 advisors there. And we had a very, very small kiosk because there wasn't a lot of sponsors. And I'm standing there with two of the most seasoned salespeople here at Zox. And they both left because they had phone calls or they were doing something. And I'm like, I've been here for like a month. What am I doing? And this woman came up and said, so I want you to know Zox changed my life. Not changed my practice. Changed my life. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, my connection with clients, my ability to be present with my family has changed because I'm not constantly worried. The number one thing advisors worry about isn't the stock market. It's, did I forget something that I needed to remember for a client? That's their number one concern. We, through our note-taking and through our systems here, are able to make it so that you get done with a client meeting within minutes. All of the follow-up is ready for you. And it listens purely. And I don't talk about this enough, but when you have live transcription, it is listening without bias. Patrice, you and I have known each other for a long time. Every time you're having a conversation with somebody, you're listening with bias.
Yep. Absolutely.
You and I have been on this planet for quite a while. We even see things with bias. It doesn't have a bias. It is taking the pure words that are coming out of your and your client's mouth, and it's transcribing them and then summarizing them, right? There are so many different things that advisors miss because of those filters that really allow you to just hear things that you normally wouldn't hear. I'm going to tell you another quick story. There's an older advisor using our system and we have an app on the phone. And so you can just put this down during a meeting and it will go ahead and transcribe live transcription during the meeting. And it was a husband and wife, and the husband was rather loud, and the wife was very, very quiet. And he didn't hear incredibly well. And he had asked the wife a question, and she was answering, and he couldn't really understand what she was saying because she was speaking so quietly. It was like one of those, he should have leaned in, or hey, can you speak up or something? But he didn't do that. He didn't want to be rude or whatever, his own issues. When the transcript came out, it showed, and the summary came out, it showed really important things that advisor didn't actually physically hear, that she was saying about some health issues that were coming up, some inheritances that were coming up, those different things. And he would have totally missed it, Patrice, if it wouldn't have been for that phone with an app sitting on the table. And that pressure relief, I believe, is why, and I've said this over and over again, I'm going to continue to say this, I think that AI in financial advisors' life is as big of a change as modern portfolio theory was for financial advisors.
Well, that's a pretty heavy note to leave this podcast on. So before we do, I'm going to ask you, anything we missed here that you want to talk about further, or, let's go into AI a bit if you want.
I want to go into AI just a little bit, because I think there's a really, really big difference. And I want the audience to understand that your own personal ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whatever you're using, is only as good as the prompts you engineer. All right. And I don't know about you, Patrice, but I'm not a prompt engineer. I know how to ask pretty good questions, but unless it's garbage in, garbage out, right? It's always been that way in the world of computers for really since the beginning of computers. And so if you ask a crappy question, it's going to give you a crappy result. When you have a system like Zox, where we have so many prompt engineers working full time to write the right prompts, so that when you're using our software, it's actually getting you the right results with the right context and pulling the right stuff. I'll give you a quick example. One of our clients was talking to a very, very, very successful CEO. And she was talking about her compensation and blah, 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 blah. And then they switched topics and they were talking about something else. And then she asked the same question that you basically, hey, what did I miss? Or what should I have asked you that I didn't? And she said, oh, I forgot to tell you, I've got this old 401k that's got this much money in it over here. And I don't want you to forget that. Zox knew that math from the end of the meeting had to be put in with the other math from the beginning of the meeting, and the math was mathed, right? So when the summary happened, it basically said, here are all of the assets, and it included that 401k that she talked about at the end of the meeting, because that's the level of organization when you have full-time prompt engineers who are writing code all the time. In fact, when we do webinars pretty often, we just did a webinar this past week, and we saw the prompt. It was actually shared with our clients in the audience, this prompt that our engineers wrote. And it was like 3 paragraphs long, right? I've never written a 3-paragraph long prompt in my entire life. So I think that's something that I want people to understand, is what you're doing with your own personal AI. It gets you about this far. When you are using a piece of software that can only and has only been written for financial services professional, it's a huge game changer.
It certainly sounds like it. Yeah. All right. Well, how can people reach you, Matt, if they want to talk some more about this?
Yeah. So if you go to zox.io/MattGPT, you will be able to schedule a demo with our team. So I highly recommend that you do that. Or you can just go to zox.com. Following me on LinkedIn is also a good thing. I'm MattGPT on LinkedIn. I'm putting out content on a regular basis, not just these podcasts, but we've got different things like Favorite Feature Friday, where I'm highlighting a very specific feature within our program. I am going to be interviewing, so I'll give you a preview of what's coming down the pipeline. I'm going to be interviewing our executives here, and I'm very, very excited about it. I'm going to interview the 3 people who are really the nuts and bolts of creating everything here. And then my second layer is going to be talking to some of the other people here who are in pseudo-executive levels, about what Zox is, how Zox can help, because I believe that if we lay a strong foundation, you and me, Patrice, help lay the strong foundation so that advisors understand what this technology can do, then we can dive in much more deeply with what it means to have a better practice and better life with some of the other guests that I have coming on. So this is going to be the last one where it's just me and you, Patrice. And from here on out, we're going to be interviewing some really, really smart people who are going to make me look definitely not like the smartest person in any room that I'm in. So
You don't have to be the smartest to understand.
Nope.
There you go.
that's very
But
true.
everybody, listen to Matt. Let him know what you're thinking, especially if you've got some experiences you want to share. And of course, follow, like, and share this podcast. And thanks for being with us.